there are very few industries or niches or verticals that evolve as fast as the solar space right now. It's fascinating to me. I love it. I love anything to do with renewable or sustainable energy. I just think is super exciting. And I mean, there's no doubt that it's not going anywhere. You look around and everyone's got solar panels on their roofs these days, and there's all these cool technologies coming out, electric cars and all this kind of stuff. I wanted to have a conversation about, I suppose, that journey of solar energy and where it's come from, where it's at, and then, potentially where it may be heading. Because it's something that is moving pretty quickly, and I've got a number of clients that are in the solar space, and they've certainly got a lot of interesting stories as to different products and solutions, and I suppose just advancements, and even at the micro level, like lots of small advancements, make a seemingly big dent. Anyway, in this conversation today, I'm talking with a client of mine on the Northern Beaches, and they've built a business out of solar installations, both residentially and commercially. And I've been nagging him for years to come on the show, and he's finally agreed. And it was an awesome conversation because this is a guy that's actually out there in the trenches, and some really interesting takes on, I suppose, that whole journey that we just discussed. And then, of course, some of the technologies that are involved within the solar space, that are also evolving that you may not see as obviously, like the monitoring and the support and all this kind of stuff. There's also a lot of those compliance things that are evolving as the technology does, which is fantastic. And we dive into a lot of those areas today. And then we also talk a bit about the different types of, financing and funding that's available for businesses who are thinking about, getting solar systems put on their premises. So anyway, I'm sure you'll enjoy this conversation. As I said, it's a guy I've known for a long time, and I've been wanting to have this conversation with him for quite a while. I hope that you guys taking on board, this ever evolving landscape of solar renewable energy. And if you're interested in that kind of stuff, I'd also encourage you to go check out, there's a series we did back in episode 188, 190 and 192 called The Future of Energy. In that series, we dived into energy on both a supply scale, a community scale, and then a residential scale. And so if you're into that kind of thing, go check it out. That's episode 188, 190 and 192. Anyway, folks, enjoy the podcast. That's enough from me. Look forward to hearing your thoughts and experiences. If you want to share them in the Facebook group, that'd be fantastic. We'd love to hear about, I suppose, what you guys are doing and, what things you've come across in relation to these topics. And to be fair, most of these topics come out of the group anyway, so you may as well jump in there. So head across to the Facebook and you can search The Site Shed. It's a private Facebook group and it's free. So see you in there. Ciao. Today's podcast has been proudly brought to you by Tradie Web Guys. Tradie Web Guys work with tradespeople only on their websites and marketing solutions to help them stand out from their competition. Everything from web design through to SEO, search engine marketing, content creation, you name it, guys. It is a customized solution for trade-based organizations and it's fantastic. Head across to tradiewebguys.com.au/apply, fill in the form, and let's have a conversation.
Giving tradies and contractors around the globe the tools to run a modern business. You're listening to Toolbox Talks from the Site Shed. Now here's your host, Matt Jones.
Gareth Felton, welcome to the Site Shed podcast.
Thank you, sir. Great to be here.
A podcast virgin.
Not anymore.
No, we're going to work you right in.
That's it, eh?
So
yeah.
for the listeners out there, Gareth's Northern Beaches, Sydney based, been a client of ours at Tradie Web Guys for years and years, and he's in the Site Shed community. And I've been nagging him and his wife Ria for, it's got to be 2 to 3 years to come on the show and talk a little bit about solar. And finally, whether it was my doing or his lovely wife Ria's, I'm not quite sure, but he finally buckled. And so we're here today to talk a little bit about solar, which is obviously, for any of you guys that follow the podcast, something that I'm pretty mad for. Anything to do with sustainable, renewable. I think there's going to be a huge future in there. I just think, to be honest, like being an electrician is just such an exciting trade to be in. Like there's so many cool things now with electrical. Obviously I'm a plumber by trade, but like my cousin just went into is just finishing up an electrical apprenticeship, and I was like, mate, it's the best thing. Like with all of the solar and automation and all these cool things now that are coming out, like it's just such an interesting space.
Yeah, it's changing fast, that's for sure.
So you're from GreenElec, and actually, maybe before we get started, you can give us a bit of a rundown on your company and sort of where it began and where it's at now, because it's sort of
Yeah,
had a bit of a journey, isn't it?
yeah. It's been some would say a long journey. There's been a lot of lessons learned along the way, but you stick with it and you get the benefits from it eventually. But basically, mate, we started in 2008 as I sort of started the company while I was still an apprentice, just trying to get a bit of capital into the business for taking that giant leap and becoming self-employed, and then figuring out what that's actually about. There's not a lot of glitz and glam about it at all. But, mate, yeah, you fast forward to here, and we've been through our original goal. My whole goal to start the business was to get into the solar world, and fortunately, the rebates at the time had run out. They canned it. The industry of solar took a real hit and slowed right down. So just focused on keeping the name, obviously GreenElec, to align with the solar side of things, knowing I'd eventually get back into it, but just focused on being a good electrical business and grew it that way. So, we eventually then got back into it about 5 to 7 years ago. Got everything lined up and started getting right into the world of solar, and now moving towards into battery.
So we've got a couple of discussions here. The first one, we're going to be talking sort of about the roadmap of the roadmap of solar over the last few years, and I suppose that segue. Are we going to talk in that episode actually about the rebates and about those changes that have happened? Yeah. Okay. Cool. Because I'm actually quite interested in that myself. Because I know, like you say, I know a few people, a lot of the listeners and viewers out there would have been through similar things. And then the other conversation, we're going to talk a little bit about more on the commercial side, so which would apply to people that are considering getting solar brought into their commercial property. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure, exactly. Yeah, commercial solar is a huge one. Yeah, heaps of benefits and a really really good future for it too.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, looking forward to it. And so we may as well jump into the first episode, because essentially this conversation is really going to, I suppose, talk a little bit about the journey of solar and the development of things like home battery systems and all of these cool things that we're so slowly starting to see come onto the market. And I'm guessing when they came on, they were kind of in beta, and over the years they're being developed further and further. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. Yeah, so as far as technology is concerned, it's almost like, the best way I can explain it is like, you go buy a laptop, you walk out the store, and they've literally put a new one on the shelf, which is like the next best version.
Yeah,
they're doing it's like that with panels. Like you've got LG that update and supersede a panel almost every 4, 5, 6 months. So
yep.
and it's the same model, but as a higher output per square meter. So that kind of technology is really changing.
I remember I did a series called The Future of Energy, which was going back to the beginning of 2019,
Right.
188, 190, and 192. The listeners out there, go check them out. Actually, they're quite interesting, because in one of those episodes, the first one we were talking about energy sources. The next one we're talking about like solar on a community scale, and the final episode we're talking more about on the residential side of things. And that conversation, the guy was saying similar thing. Then he was like, "Well, there's actually, there's a lot of options, and they come at different price ranges, and people very often will pick the wrong one, which is why it's important to deal with people like yourselves, so you're getting the right product."
Yeah.
But I was interested. I think it's actually quite a general, probably misconception in the marketplace when it comes to, well, maybe just general understanding is probably a better way to put it, because a lot of people I speak to about solar are kind of the opinion that it's not worth it. I live up here now in northern New South Wales, and every second home's got solar panels on it, and you can see why. It's sunny all the time, and it's, yeah, exactly. But like, I think a lot of people don't really understand. And I know this because mum and dad, they just moved up to the Gold Coast. They got solar panels on their roof. And I said, "Oh, is it for your hot water or is it for your grid?" And they're like, "Oh, I don't know." And I'm like, well, you should probably find that out. 100%. And I'm pretty sure theirs got put in, like you were saying before, when that whole government rebate incentive thing was in place. And I guess since then, they were speaking to their neighbour who said, "Oh, it costs us more to have these panels." And I was like, I don't know if that's actually true.
Yeah, well, I mean, it also just depends on if it's working for them or not. It's one of those things. But look, I mean, since back then, it's changed so dramatically. Like I
Right.
mean, even the standards, the licensing systems, the audits, the checks. Like we don't get away with installing a solar system noticed. You know what I mean? Like when you're putting solar systems on roofs, you got to understand that you are most likely going to have it inspected. So, which is really good, really great for someone like us, a business like ours and others out there that really do try and do a good job. You know, we know that's going to happen. We work to that, whereas a lot of people still just slap stuff together and deal with the repercussions.
And so, from a compliance point of view, is that what you're saying? That's where a lot of the changes come into play now. Like, there's a lot of compliance.
Yeah. Yeah, like they're constantly updating standards around, even the switches that you use, DC switches that are on the roof that isolate the solar systems.
Right.
Even the standards around them, and they're constantly reassessing whether these items that are currently required in systems are even still required, or whether they're more of a hazard, that something might happen down the track. So the standards that they're writing, they're constantly rewriting them still.
Right. Right. Can you see, is there a foreseeable end to that, or is that going to be something that's always going to be up? Yeah, okay.
It should never change.
Yeah.
It should always improve and become, not more complicated, but more concise and more directive,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, well, that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
And so, aside from, like you were saying before, from a technology perspective, you've obviously got panels that are always going to be improved. And is that like a material thing, or just the technology into them, or both? Or
yeah, look, I mean, there is a material item, but the main changes that are coming through have to do with how they structure the panels, how they build the panels. I mean, shading and different directions of roof are always something that we're battling with, and they're our biggest battle when you're coming to design, to get the most efficient system out of your square meterage. But the panel manufacturers themselves, instead of just using a certain type of inverter, power optimizer, or micro inverter, they're actually trying to combat these issues within the panel rather. So, so that products like SMA, who we work with, their technology works towards how the panels are now being manufactured as well. So, so there's more expensive solutions to a shading or a directional issue aren't always needed.
Gotcha. Okay. That's sort of assessing the problem at the harvesting stage.
Yeah.
Okay.
100%. Yeah. So panels, like their biggest goals are efficiency, shading, and other issues like that, and then also how much can they put into one panel, and a standard size panel that works for a resi.
From an ignorant person's point of view, like when you're talking solar installations, are they, like you talk about shading and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Does solar only work in direct sunlight, or does it, like, can it work if there's UV around?
It'll still work when there's UV around. I mean, even when you have decent monitoring, that's quite accurate. On a full moon with no clouds, you can still get some generation at night.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Yeah, so no, it doesn't need direct light, but obviously there's an optimum direction and an optimum the panel should be on. And you can't look. I mean, 99.9% of the time you don't get it, right?
Yeah.
So that's why it's important to still have an efficient panel but work within certain parameters that you can on site, and often we're the last people that get a say in that.
So I'm in, if I'm jumping the gun, tell me, but I know from the last conversations that I had, I found it quite interesting when the guys on the show were saying, well, in terms of solar harvesting, it's still the best use of it is to use it as you harvest it, as opposed to trying to store it in batteries or put it back in the grid. Is that still the case?
Yeah, currently still is. Yeah, I mean, I've had recent dealings with clients that are getting really good feed-in tariffs, but you got to understand that the energy companies are, I don't know if I get in trouble with this kind of stuff, like they're always working an angle, and they're a business at the end of the day, and a business is not something there to just do nothing, it's there to make a profit. So that's what they're doing, right? So the rebates at the moment, I've heard people getting 22 cents per kilowatt hour that they put in, which is around about what you're paying for energy on a good deal, but they're still using high rates for peak and all that kind of stuff, knowing you don't have a battery and all that kind of stuff. So they're banking on you making the money back for them at some point. in a day. So yes, the currently self-consumption is still exactly what you want to be doing with your
I'm,
solar.
I'm guessing we'll dive more into that in the next conversation when we're talking on a sort of a commercial level. But I know even back when I was looking at it, I was like, well, it would make sense for me to have solar at a house if I'm working from it, because it could run the air conditioner or part of while I'm sitting in the home office, recording
100%,
podcasts.
and COVID's brought that to light even more so nowadays. So
Right. Okay.
yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, very.
In terms of the tariffs and the rebate side of things, like I know over the years there's been a lot of changes. I'm respectful of the fact as well, I suppose we've got a lot of listeners that aren't based in Australia. What are some of the changes that we've seen here? I'm sure many of them have been reflected from a government point of view and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so some of the changes that we see, obviously, there's a more structured rebate scheme at the moment that we can use, and there's two ways that you get or three ways you get your return on battery on solar, right? On your investment into solar, it's effectively a rebate, which is off the shelf. You purchase it. Generally, the installing company will claim that for you and take it off the bottom line and charge you the rest. The second way is that you obviously use the energy on site. That's one way, and then obviously there's an export tariff. That's the third way that you're going to make your ROI. Basically, the rebate nowadays in Australia is based on size of the system and where you're located, and you'll generate credits. Credits go up and down depending on demand when they're when they're getting traded by bigger businesses that have to purchase these because they need to keep their green levels right.
Right.
And I mean, basically, at the moment they started at a 15-year deeming period. Now they've got it at 11 years, and they're tapering it off each year so that as solar becomes cheaper, the rebate becomes less, and it just transitions us into a completely affordable, no rebate scenario.
Gotcha. Okay. And so, is there like a foreseeable future? I know you see a lot of conversations and things popping up on Facebook and that kind of stuff with, people trying to move off grid, and is that where the battery side of things is really going to come into play?
Yeah, batteries. There's a huge future for batteries and storage in general. Like, I think just for batteries, I mean, it's probably a later combo, but batteries, recycling of batteries and end of life of batteries is something they need to figure out as well.
Right.
Because they die and then a lot of them are toxic. So we got to figure out what happens to those once they're no longer useful. And that's 10, 15, 20 years time, we might have an issue. So we need to figure that out now. But the benefit that I can't see any rebates coming through for batteries at this point. I think it should happen.
But what about more from like a user perspective? I mean, sure, maybe the government's not going to offer a rebate, but then if you put a battery in and you're saving yourself, I mean, I'm guessing it would need to be, I'm guessing they're not cheap to install, and you probably need a shitload of years use out of them for them to pay themselves off.
Yeah. I mean, so look, batteries are expensive to put in. They still are. Why would you get a battery? You would be getting a battery because you're happy to pay slightly higher per kilowatt hour cost for energy. You're happy to pay that, knowing that you're getting it from your roof. It's your energy. You made it, and you're not drawing that load from a power station.
Yeah.
The other reason is for backup. And obviously, you might be in an area that has constant backup. You don't really need to be completely off grid, and you like the fact that you are connected to the grid for most of your energy use. So,
I suppose on the flip side of that argument, though, is the whole conversation around like the ignorance of people not understanding where batteries come from, and the fact that you have to mine lithium ion and all this stuff comes out of the ground. So people are like, oh, I'm off the grid. I'm like, well done, but you still need a mining company to get you your battery.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, they're all transitioning into that world of mining stuff for renewables now. So but that boosts what they're doing for coal as well. So,
and I guess that's kind of ties into that what you were saying just before about the whole, like them needing to figure out that ecosystem around manage recycling and managing existing batteries and putting life back into them. I know that Elon Musk is right into all this stuff, isn't he, with his whole Tesla battery home systems? Are they the ones, do you guys use any, have you installed those things before?
Yeah, the Tesla stuff. So I have a fairly slow approach on some things and partnering with people and obviously doing things. But recently, we've become partners of Tesla, so we're certified installers and of their Powerwall. Their product is amazing. It's user friendly. It's a really good, well thought out product. And there are other options, of course, but you can't really beat his outwardness to push things in that direction. He's sort of the only one out there.
Pioneer.
Yeah, just pioneering the whole thing. And not only that, like he does 1,000 other things in a day too. So
yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the Cybertruck. I put an order on one, so we'll see. If it gets made, I'll be the only wanker driving around up here and not, I'm sure of it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, look, batteries are still expensive. They're getting there. They're becoming more modular too. So you're not either getting a 5 kilowatt or a 10 kilowatt hour battery. It's like, you can go 2.5, 5, 7.5, 10.
Oh, okay. So you can bolt on accessories.
It brings that, you get yourself in at 5 kilowatt hours and then add a little bit on if need be of the same product. You know what I mean? So it's always changing.
So from a residential point of view, well, and commercial, I suppose, like, is part of your role really like ascertaining whether solar is going to be a good investment for a home or a business based on consumption? Is that the idea?
So yeah, and look, I mean, we will go further into this, but effectively, if you're not going into the way I see it anyway, and I'm allowed opinion, it doesn't have to line up with anyone else's, but the way I see it is you should be going into a house or a commercial dwelling trying to reduce the amount of energy they currently use.
Right.
And then install solar after that. Yeah, on a commercial scale, it might not make much of a difference, but on a residential scale, it can make a big difference to, how much storage do they need? What can they do with their solar system during the day, and as far as delaying products and items throughout the day, dishwashers, washing machines, dryers, all that kind of stuff, to work when the most likely time in the day is full sun. Just changing a few characteristics about the people rather than constantly trying to tailor a system to fit into the other way around.
So is that kind of, I mean, habit changing is always the hardest speed bump for anyone to, I suppose, confront. But then is that part of your process? Do you sort of say, well, if you can do this, this, and this at these times, then this is the potential output difference?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean,
can you track that? Can that be?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So in the early days when people were getting solar, they were like, right, I'm going to go get a solar system and an aircon unit.
Yeah.
And I'm going to turn the aircon unit all the time. The house is always going to be 23 degrees. It's going to be awesome. And they were getting, yeah. Good to see you got a ceiling fan back there.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, they were spending more money on energy, and how does this work? And it's just purely because they didn't understand it. But what I'm getting at is people understand now. Generally speaking, when I go and speak to a client and I mention to them, look, there's a few things you're going to have to change to make the most out of your solar system, they go, oh yeah, for sure, we already know that. We know we're going to have to make a few changes, but we wanted to get some suggestions as to what they might be. I think people are caught on and a lot smarter about it. Even in the last 2 years, I've noticed people having much more in-depth conversations and technical conversations with myself than what I did prior to that. There's a lot in social media.
There's a lot of great podcasts around with lots of information. There's one anyway.
Yeah, there's one.
I'm curious as well, what we're talking about, I suppose, the journey of that roadmap of solar. From a logistical point of view, installing, are there many limitations and bearings placed on what product could be installed where? I mean, obviously, when you're going into an existing home, you're effectively retrofitting everything, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
I mean, even with a new home, is it all retrofitted also?
No, new homes are a hard one. With new buildings, generally speaking, you don't solidify the products that you're going to use until, let's say, a month out of completion.
Why's that?
Because of how quickly it changes.
Wow, really?
Yeah. So you can budget pretty easily for a solar system, and I mean, you're always going to have drawings to work off. So, and you can work out what products are going to be in the home and its likely draw on of energy, and you can work out a size of system for them and a direction and how you're going to mount it. But picking the panel and picking the inverter, I don't see why you should do that until about a month out. You can run the cables during while the walls aren't sheeted and all that kind of stuff. but then it becomes, that's not retrofitted as such. But you got to watch when you have that lock-in conversation of, right, we're going to use this, this, and this. You just leave that till later on in the process, because you'll find that products will change, technology will change.
I don't know. We've got lots of roofing clients, but I think Paul Grover, who's right up near you. But he, like, I remember talking to him about the future of, I mean, essentially putting roof panels on. Like, you just think, wow, this could just harvest. And then I know Tesla came out with that shingle, which was meant to harvest, and apparently it's pretty expensive and doesn't really work or something. But I mean, I imagine like that would be a bit of a no-brainer for people. Like, if they can incorporate installing, a Colourmon roof panel which harvests energy. I mean, why would you not want to do that if it's cost effective?
Without a doubt, yeah. I mean, even flexible panels now are a thing. Like, you can have your Colourmon roof, and you literally paint the ridges of the roof
Oh,
with a glue, and you lay these panels down and then connect them up afterwards.
right.
And you can have curved roofs and all that kind of stuff, but again, you're dictated by the pitch and direction of that roof as well. So whether or not the efficiency of these roofs is where it should be is another story.
So I know I will probably talk about this a little bit in the next episode or the next conversation, but I know in the last series I did, there was one of the guys was telling us, I think it might have been when he was talking about the commercial side of things, but he was saying you could even get some like windows for big office buildings that actually harvest energy.
Yeah, that's cool stuff. They do them high rises. They'll do like the top 5 floors sort of thing, because the bottom is just surrounded by buildings as well. But on
Right.
the top buildings, yeah, they can make your windows solar panels, and they've got to be tinted anyway. So you're not going
Right.
to, like, you're trying to get more light in those windows. So you may as well put something useful on them.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And you're saying some of the windows have, like, you can get like one-way LED like chips put in them, and they've got like solar next or harvesting next to them. And if you look really close, you can see like these LED chips. And you go outside, and the whole window's lit up, and it's like,
it's so good.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So yeah, it's a changing technology, mate. It really is.
So where do you foresee it heading? Like, what are going to be some of the significant, not to turn you into a futurist or anything, but what do you see some of the significant changes that are going to happen or have to happen?
Well, it already is happening. I think what they're managing to fit into the footprint of a solar panel, what you get per meter square, of space, I think they're only going to get more output out of those areas.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the monitoring and control of energy is where future really lies. That comes into, load control. So for businesses, they might run certain things at certain times, and that's part of their business processes in a manufacturing sense or in an industrial sense.
Gotcha.
Or, with shifts, they might do certain shifts in the day and other shifts at night. They might work out what's a high consuming shift and change that up a bit as well. But the point of it is measurement and data, and how you do that, how you collate it, put it into an understandable reporting system or something you can view.
And so is that technology that's available to the user? Like, is it come in an app or a dashboard or something?
Yeah, most inverters will come with, like, whatever inverter product you use, they'll come with a monitoring system attached. So whether the inverter itself connects directly to the home's internet, and then you have a login when you're on that Wi-Fi network, or even when you're not at the home. But then there's the next step further, is being able to measure your consumption, your home's consumption at the same time. So when you're up or down on energy use, or whether you're importing or exporting from the grid. The importance of that is obviously leading straight into batteries and then storage.
Right.
And when do you use your battery, and what do you use it for? And that's where that's all heading in a massive way.
I'm guessing that's something that some of these bigger energy providers are kind of sweating on a bit, right? Because then people are going to be becoming more conscious of what their spending is and what their usage rate is, and they'd be like,
well, the people that need to be, a bit wary, and they obviously are. I mean, these people have got people that all their job is to do is figure out where is this going. I think generators, in a general sense, should be the ones that are a bit weary about it, and figuring out, they're making their own energy now. They're coming into a world where they can store it and then control that too. for themselves. Like independence is a massive, like, I think a very scary thing for them.
Yeah, totally.
So, but that's where it's going. I don't think they can stop it. So whether they facilitate it, whether they help make that process happen and get involved in that for, as a positive, then I think, that'll be only time we'll be able to tell that.
Do you think there's going to be any movement towards other forms of renewable or sustainable energy? Like I mean, when you live on the coast here, and the summer you're exposed to a nor'easter, and the winter you're exposed to the southerlies, and there's always wind blowing. Like you don't see any like propellers on the top of houses, harvesting wind.
Yeah, not yet, but I think, look, the wind side of things is strange as well, because it's a visual thing. And I think solar panels were as well, but let's be honest. I mean, you can make a black rectangle for a solar panel and people are still going to call it ugly.
Right.
Because people just don't like looking at them.
Yeah.
And that's why people go for the shingle style, or, a different type of tile style roof. That's what they want. Efficiency's the other story on that. But when it comes to windmills or wind generation, I think we've already got whirlybirds on roofs to get rid of heat inside a roof.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so like when they make it a visually appealing enough thing for people to do, and not just the people that are hardcore into renewables, and they know, generally speaking, when there's more wind, there's less sun, because it's generally storm conditions. I'm going to be generating more, if not the same amount of power. Once people sort of get past that, I think the visual thing, once that changes, like wind will become a thing too.
So when you're carrying out these installations and you're sort of doing your handover or whatever, is part of that handover equipping and training the property owner or manager on the monitoring system?
Has to be, yeah. Like, okay, so monitoring is one of the most important things that you do when you're doing a solar. Aside from a really good install and everything being compliant, you've got to be able to hand over a system and spend time talking to the client about how their system is going to perform for them, because an east and west design system is not going to perform the same as an all north system.
Right.
And they need to understand that they're going to have, an east-west system. They need to understand they're going to have early morning generation and late afternoon generation.
Right.
But they're not going to have a high peak in the middle of the day.
Right.
So their peak will be lower, but they'll have longer generation. Yeah. So, how do they utilize that best?
And so is that like, I mean, obviously, how do you obtain that data prior to recommending an installation? I mean,
it's design software, and what people have to understand is that we don't know how many cloudy days there are going to be in a year.
Right.
We do have a pretty damn good idea of how shade's going to move across an area.
Yeah.
What directions and tilts, and we can use products like Nearmap that have solar predicting technology in them.
Gotcha.
And you can get a good idea of what you're going to, what you're going to produce, and you can be conservative. Like most of the time, I'm working off a 75 to 80% efficiency rate for these systems, and a lot of the time, 80-90% of the time they excel beyond that. So, if you're conservative about it and not over the top and doing, sort of the wrong thing as far as I'm concerned, is when it comes to expectation of an output, I think people will do well.
Yeah. I think that's kind of a metaphor for business and potentially life in general, just manage expectations. That's what I always tell clients, manage expectations. Like, communication will solve 99% of your problems.
Yeah, 100%. And look, as I was saying, so like the monitoring side of things is that important that you can't, without monitoring, you can't have this conversation with the client. You can say, listen, just make sure, if you don't have monitoring, all you can say is, just make sure that you try and use all your staff during 9 a.m. and 4 p.m., right? You just do that. With monitoring, you say, if you want to do this, check your app.
Right.
If you're exporting more than 500 watts, don't throw your washing machine on.
Right.
You're golden. If the house is a bit hot or cold, throw your aircon on and just check how much. And if you're happy and it's the right period of the day, and you're happy to draw a little bit from the grid, then great.
So I think as well, probably that conversation is becoming a lot more comfortable with people as well, because they're, now with the introduction of all these amazing, home automation things. I mean, like we've got these air conditioning unit here that connects to my Google Home, and like it's so cool. Like I think like people are getting more and more comfortable and familiar with going back to apps and tools to sort of check these sort of things.
That's right, and they're all starting with stuff like the Internet of Things and the devices that are coming with it, like what you just said. The ability to tell something what to do when something else is happening,
right?
Crazy. So there's devices as well now, and they've been around for a while, that will divert excess energy where normally you would need to use the grid to okay. So I'm specifically talking about water unit and a diverter that monitors the flow of energy on your home. So it clamps onto your mains through a little meter, and it knows whether the energy is coming in or out of the home and how much that is. And if you're generating a lot of power, let's say 5 kilowatts off the roof, and you're only using 3 in the home, you've got 2 going out to the grid at a low rate. Or you can divert that power straight into your hot water unit and have that charging up instead of charging your hot water unit up in an off-peak period, which costs you more than the tariff. So,
right.
And these are set and forget sort of scenarios, and they've got the ability to boost and all that kind of stuff. So there's more and more things are coming in to complement having solar and batteries as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I suppose that's as well, I mean, that's sort of leads into another huge topic, when you're talking about like green building and like how, I mean, obviously we're talking about putting, solar panels on roof here, but then on roofs, but that will also tie into, the way homes are built and how well they're built, and, if they're facing the right direction. And I know a client of ours down in the south coast of New South Wales, and he's massive into that, like he builds a lot of homes and makes sure that they really do their homework in the initial stages, making sure that it's going to be as energy efficient as possible.
In new build, that's where it all comes. That's where it all starts,
right?
So that the house can continue to be as efficient as possible. I mean, double glazed windows and insulation, all that kind of stuff. It's all the stuff that needs to be thought out prior to building the home and then sizing a solar system for it.
Yeah.
Some people now opting not to have any aircon at all because they built their houses in such a way that it will retain heat well, and it'll actually stay a fairly settled temperature within the home year round.
Yeah.
So it's all. I think it's passive building. Like they've just got to the design process. Once they get that, it's sort of pretty easy for them.
And I think, like, from my experience, there's been that's been missing so badly. Like, I mean, my wife's from Canada, and she reckons the coldest she's ever been is in winter in Sydney. Like, just because the homes are built so terribly, insulation's shocking. Like the raft coming through everywhere. It's true. Like, they just you're never cold. You go to Europe or North America, and you're in these homes, and you're never cold. Like, you just wear a t-shirt, and you go outside, and it's 3 feet of snow. Whereas it seems like the homes here, they just don't. That hasn't been considered for so long. Whereas now, maybe there's sort of been a bit of a shift into making sure, everything's good.
I think also people have realised that when you're building a home, you're not. It's going to be there for a long time, and you're going to live in it. So ongoing, cost wise and comfort wise, these things are going to last a long time, and they can't cost you an arm and a leg.
Did you want to touch on any of that sort of on the financial options and that kind of stuff?
Absolutely, yeah. Look, we've got it relates to both commercial and residential installations and services, but I mean the financial side of it's something that's got to be nailed. I mean, when you start right at the start of the financial conversation when you're buying solar, it'll go into different ways of purchasing, but the conversation at the very start is how important is the ROI or return on investment for the client. And, generally speaking, a sort of higher mid-end to high-end solar system is still going to be getting that, 4 to 5 year return on current rates that we're paying. But, still decent systems and installed well, you can be hovering around that 3 year mark. So,
to pay it off.
to pay itself back. Yeah, we're self-consuming the energy it'll produce during the
Oh,
day.
that's pretty quick.
Yeah, so it's a lot quicker than it was, because the conversations I was having was, it's not going to be less than 5 years.
Right.
We'll do all we can. Now it's constantly below 4. If we're hitting a good sweet spot of 3 and we're getting a good installation in with great products, good warranties, and we can walk away where a client knows exactly how they're going to use that system to get 3 years, perfect.
Score.
Yeah, that's the real benefit.
But that essentially, to a degree, is almost out of your hands, isn't it? I mean, that sort of comes down to, like, if for a new project, the builder, the architect, like, what systems they choose. And I mean, obviously you can advise and guide, but do you find that's often an issue? Like, do you get out on a building site and go, hang on, why are we doing this? We should be doing this.
Yeah, the issue that we're facing currently, which I think is changing, is that we don't get consulted
Yeah.
at the start. And there's no real world at the moment for consultation. It's something that we're gearing our business towards, so that I can consult with an architect or a builder directly and say, listen, in your design process, how about you rethink that 3-phase air conditioner?
And I think, to be fair, that's common across trades. Like, you speak to plumbers that have similar experiences with, hot water systems and things, and they're like, why are we doing this? We should be putting this in. And, like, there's so much. I mean, and it's almost impossible for an architect to be across the board with all of these. Like, as you're saying, like, solar panels are updated within 6 months.
Well, everyone says the same thing. Really, that quickly, and I say, I would never lock myself into something I'm doing in 6 months' time. That's just not a good idea result.
So do you have a framework around that, around sort of liaising with architects and builders, if that's what it comes to, developers?
100%. So a lot of our work comes from builders and other electricians who don't want to, or just haven't got into the world of solar, where they'll come to us and say that they've got a client, they're at the start of a build process. Even their basics might dictate that they have to have some sort of PV on their roof.
Yep.
And it's usually some trivial amount, like 1 kilowatt or something like that, which you'd never these days put onto a home. But they'll come to us and say, listen, we've been told we have to do solar. We want to know what we should do. And then at that point, I can then ask questions of, okay, what are you putting into this house? I'll tell you what size you should have, and then basically say to you, listen, at this current stage, which I can only foresee getting a little bit better for you, you'd be allowing, $1,100-1,200 per kilowatt out-of-pocket expense, okay? And that's where you should put your budget in for a good system, and you can always scale it back from there if you're not interested in having a really, whiz-bang product. You can go for good stuff that has good warranties and doesn't really have all the bells and whistles as the top-range stuff.
Right.
Our framework around it is just constantly give information. Just be there when they need it, design for them what they can, and eventually I think this whole, people are now, but they will catch on more to coming to us as a source of information rather than Google.
I suppose it puts architects and designers in a tricky situation where their job's really they're supposed to, design the place, and then as it goes out to tender or whatever, like, they don't even know who the contractor may be at that point. They would rarely know. I mean, the builder might have an idea of who he's going to use, of course, but I mean, the architect may not.
Well, that's what prompted me when we were getting approached by architects, and they were saying, listen, the client, we can fit 9 panels on this roof. We need you to quote the system. And look, 9 panels isn't a huge system, by any means, but people were coming back with just any product, right? And then lowest price wins. But that's what prompted me to say to the architect or a builder, listen, before you go out to tender, come talk to me. I'll let you know what you should go to tender with as a requirement, what output, what product level, whatever, and then go out to tender, and we'll supply you the price and go to 2 others and price match it or do whatever you got to do with it, but at least have the information there.
Right. Yeah. So I suppose that could, from your point of view, work 2 ways. They could either see that as like a massive effort on your behalf and build trust and rapport, or they could just go and, like you say, give it to someone they could price shop it, knock 10%
Yeah,
off.
they could take the information I give them and they could run with it. But that's where I think the world of consultation needs to come in, where guys like myself have got a lot of experience in the world and we keep in touch with it and we're available. We come in as a service to the process of building as a necessity, rather than we can get a little bit of information out of this bloke that'll figure out sort of roughly what we need, and then we'll go to tender and get the cheapest one. That'd be great.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, but look, I mean, it's changing, and I think they're catching on to it, and a lot of architects are really into it now, so it helps.
Is there a lot to do in the maintenance side of things?
Yeah, there is. Solar is fairly self-maintaining. There's obviously a degree of angle that the panels have got to sit at to be able to wash any dirt or dust or whatever that's sat on the panel, bird poo and all that kind of stuff. It's a real thing. But, they still need to be checked. And on a residential scale, with monitoring, you can do that. You can look at it and say, right, so year on year, this time last year, I was producing an average of this amount per day.
Right.
Whereas this year, I'm only producing an average amount of this amount per day. Or you can notice more dramatic things like a real underproduction. And the monitoring systems will often alert you and us about that before you even go to look at it. So maintenance-wise, not a hell of a lot on a residential scale, because you can check it yourself and you can get someone to come in and clean the panels if need be, very carefully not to damage the film on the front of the panels and all that. But still to get up there, have a look, make sure nothing's, dangling underneath the panels or there's no birds or anything nesting under them.
Right, okay.
And just to test the output. But generally speaking, you can do all of that from an app. On a commercial scale, I'd say once a year the system should be checked, particularly on site. Basically just inverter locations, are they getting too hot? Panels, are there any broken ones? Because we're talking about hundreds of panels, not just 20. All right,
So inevitably something's going to be wrong with one of them.
Exactly. If one goes wrong, a string drops down, and then you've got low production that just might need a little bit of attention, and can save potential hazards later down the track too on that scale. So yeah, I mean, it happens. I mean, monitoring helps. The systems do degrade, like anything that sits in the sun, it drops off. There is a fair bit of maintenance on a commercial scale, but not residential.
Lovely. Is there anything we haven't covered here?
Mate, I think what I'd like to go over is the options in the financial perspective. We touched on return on investment, but I think the way that people are purchasing energy as well is really important. And it's on a residential scale as well as commercial. Mm-hmm. Very briefly, I mean, residential scale, generally speaking, people are using their own capital to purchase.
Yeah.
Where they've got the money sitting there, they know what they want to spend, they want the best product they can for their money. Then you've got a scenario where they're getting a system financed where they're happy to pay it because they're happy to pay a fee because it's a no interest loan, and in 3 or 4 years they'll own the system and they're happy with that. Okay, great. I don't agree with it in every sense. I'm not partnered with anyone. We don't really offer finance in that sense. If someone said to me I need to finance, I'd say try and put it on your mortgage, but I'm not a financial advisor at all, so don't take that advice if you don't have to. Look, a lot of the time you're paying 20% on top of the cost of the system before credits. Right. So on a $10,000 system, you're paying a penalty, as far as I see it, of $2,000. That's insane for a system of that size. You may as well just bang it on a high rate credit card.
Right.
But I just, I would always to ask people in a residential sense to try and use their own capital. It's pretty basic. You can get small loans, but when it comes to a commercial side of things, there's a few different options. So the first one is a power purchase agreement. Okay. It's a really interesting way. There's a threshold to which this works. It doesn't work for everyone because of return. There's obviously green loans, which are just labelled green loans. They're just basically financing, but on a larger scale and more geared towards asset financing for businesses. Oh, yeah. And then obviously business capital. There's been a lot of report, and it's very obvious now that if you have capital sitting in a business, your return that you're going to get from solar is often higher than when it's just sitting in the bank.
Shit, really?
Yeah, so a lot of property groups are putting solar on their buildings because they're getting a better return out of that than buying, I don't know, more property or whatever. So they're using their rooftops to cover expenses of having that building in a common area. It's really, really quite interesting that they've worked that out. And
so is there a way then they can essentially sell that back to the tenants or something?
Yeah, there is. There's ways of doing that. One of the, yes, there's, again, via monitoring. It's all comes back to that ability to see the energy flow and where it's going, how it's being used, and what time. There's places like Reposit Power that basically just an aggregator. They'll tell you how much energy is being used off the roof, and you can charge it. It's directed at tenants, so where that might be commercial or residential, where the owner of the building will purchase a solar, sell the energy being produced off the roof at a lower rate to the tenant, and therefore not only getting rent but getting a return off the energy that they're producing as a generator. So there is ways to do that, but when you're a building, let's say a logistics centre or a manufacturing firm, you own the building, there's a few ways that you can purchase. Power purchase agreements are a really good way to do it. It's a zero upfront cost item. It's basically a company comes in, they'll put solar on the roof, they sell you the energy that system's producing. Okay, and after a certain period of time, or at any point in that agreement period, you have the option to buy that system and hold on to it forevermore.
Okay.
And in a lot of these agreements, you're also paying off the system, and after 5 years, 4 years, whatever it might be, you own the system anyway. And
so are you using the energy that it's generating to pay it off?
Yeah.
Oh, right. So it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, exactly. But there is a threshold. I'm a bit uneducated on the exact threshold, but one of the guys that we work with in the power purchase agreement world says, there is a certain threshold. I think it's just based on size of business, energy yield, roof space, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And then you've got to basically know, okay, I've got enough room to cover your energy, export a little bit, and then it makes it worthwhile for the business. So
that's cool.
There's a threshold that you've got to work to on the power purchase agreement side of things, but it's a really good way for no capital outlay, instant benefits with the option of getting out of the system or getting out of it when capital becomes free. You can then buy the system straight off the company that's put the system on the roof.
Sweet.
So there's a few options there for commercial businesses. Residentially, not a hell of a lot. There's the small loan businesses and stuff like that. But I think the way to go on a resi scale is to try and use your own capital.
Yeah, nice. Awesome, mate. Well, it's been good.
Yeah.
So we're going to come back in another conversation, and we're going to talk about I suppose on the commercial solar side of things, we're going to talk a bit about that customer journey, aren't we? We talk about the way you audit, or way you attack an audit, or prepare an audit, or whatever, and then take that to the design and construct stage, and then I suppose looking forward beyond the installation, what you can do to maintain and look after the systems.
Yeah, mate. Yeah, we just want to go through what process should be taken so you know that you're getting the right thing, rather than just fitting as much as possible onto the roof.
Yeah, cool. So all you builders and sparkies out there, get ready for that one, because that's going to be some gold. Gareth, thanks very much for your time. You're from greenelec.com.au. If anyone wants to go check it out. Yeah, really appreciate it, mate. It's been great.
Thank you, mate.
All right. And for the listeners out there, if you want to get hold of Gareth, you can do so. He's in the Facebook group. Head across to the SiteShed private community over there. Ask any questions as you see these pop up. And we would love you to be part of the conversation. If you've got experience with solar, or if you've had come across any of these situations that we've spoken about, or you've got any opinions, we'd love to hear them. Always love a good argument in the Facebook group. So I'd love to go start one of them. Anyway, guys, that's all from me. We'll look forward to chatting to you again in the next episode. And thanks again, Gareth.
Thank you, mate.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Toolbox Talks. If you're liking what you hear, then you can head across to the siteshed.com, where you can join our community by signing up to our Toolbox Talks. You'll get sent a weekly notification, which is basically a highlight of everything that we've spoken about during that week, along with any other industry news that may be relevant or specific to the trades. If you're enjoying the show, you can head across to iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, where you can leave us a review. That would be fantastic, and all the reviews get read out in the show. Likewise, if you have any friends or colleagues that you think would benefit from the show and the episodes that we create, then please go ahead and share it with them.